All right. So, Seth and I just decided to talk about, since we're way past the second half of the NBA season, but towards the end of, gosh, what do we have? Like three or four more matchups?
It's yeah, one of the weeks is like a double long
Yeah.
week,
So,
probably over the All-Star break, I think.
yeah. So this matchup. So, yeah, five matchups, but just thought it would be a good time to check in, kind of talk uh, trades and their effects, kind of what our standings look like, just kind of some surprises, some disappointments, things like that. Just kind of chat about what was going on and go from there. So, um, one of the things that I was kind of noticing, kind of as a trend over this year, is it seems like we're more competitive than we were last year.
Hmm.
What would you say, Seth?
Yeah, I think so. Uh, it's definitely a lot more bunched up than it has been. I think a few outliers, towards the bottom, some teams start to trail usually, but
Yeah,
um, the top eight, like I thought for a moment a couple weeks ago, I thought there was going to be kind of a top six that started to distance themselves.
yeah,
But 7 and 8, Joel and Paul
yep.
right now are hanging really tough, and both of them are killing their matchups this week.
Matchups
So
this
it's
week.
it
Yeah,
looks like it's going to cinch up even more when this one's done.
yeah, yeah. That was what I was gonna say. I mean, I was gonna say it's a top four, but then like you've really got two other. I mean, me and Sam aren't too far behind in there. So, and then like you said, once Paul and Joel's
I need to get my Valentine.
once Paul and Joel's matchups go through, it will be for sure top eight. So, which is good. It's good to be more competitive throughout the league. So,
Yeah, it's pretty tight up top too. I mean,
yeah.
Rob jumped out to kind of a big lead early this year, and
Mm-hmm.
I think some of the pack started to gain on him a little bit, but then the LeBron injury really hurt him as well. And so
Yeah. Yep.
we should see some recovery, I would say, from his team. And um, yeah,
Yeah.
of course, Will and I made a huge kind of franchise altering trade with Giannis and Kawhi and Butler and Clay all going Will's way. So that
Yep.
was, I think, one that he saw as kind of a win now. Like, I know he
Mm-hmm.
made there's some teams that are rebuilding but still kind of young. I think probably your team is a good example of that, where he sees maybe a window before a team like yours gets like fully into their primes. So I
Yeah.
think he's trying to capitalize this year, and he was able to take a lot of star players from one of his main rivals in my team this year.
Yeah.
So certainly that kind of tipped the scales down the stretch. I'm holding him off barely right now, but I think we face each other next week. So that'll
Yeah.
be interesting to see if he's able to like crush me next week, with all my former stars. So we'll see. But on my end, Giannis is 3 or 4 years younger than most of those guys I gave up.
Yeah.
And I was kind of taking the stance of, I knew he wouldn't do the deal in the off season because
Yep.
it's a win now kind of exchange. And I thought if I was starting a team right now from scratch and I had the top two picks in the draft, I'd probably take Davis and Giannis. So I thought that opportunity was a good chance to sort of rebuild on the fly.
Absolutely. And um, that kind of leads us to branch off whichever way we want. Do you want to
I
talk
guess
trades, or do you want to talk
let's
like
talk. Yeah, let's talk trades.
talk trades? Okay.
You can lead
So
off.
and we'll
Thoughts on
we'll come back
Porzingis?
to LeBron and kind of some of the other people's kind of some disappointments and some surprises that we've seen. Um, so a couple of I'll try to focus on the ones that are kind of more long term trades, because some of these like TJ Warren and Akobo, like that one was
Mhm.
pretty decent, but it doesn't necessarily. I mean, it kind of helped that you got Warren to then go on to grab Clay. That was a big deal.
Yeah.
But the Porzingis for Russell and Aaron Gordon trade, I thought was a big trade that helped Kurt and definitely helped Calvin.
Yeah.
that was a smart trade. He'd been holding on to Russell and Gordon for a while, and they'd been disappointments. It kind of sucks. He talked with me about it before he made the trade, and then I was like, oh yeah, because both of us have always been big Russell fans.
Mm-hmm.
And so he knew, like, hey, am I giving up on him too early? And I was like, no, he kind of is what he is at this point. And of course, blown up this season. But Aaron Gordon, I kind of said Aaron Gordon was going to be who he was, and he's kind of backtracked a little bit. And so, I mean, I guess I can feel good that I gave him some sage advice there. But Calvin turned that around and traded him for in the deal for Trae Young, which I thought at the time was an interesting trade because Trae Young was really struggling at the beginning of the year, because essentially this is a D'Lo for Trae trade. I mean, Ariza's a solid vet, Randall's a solid vet, Willie Cauley-Stein and Bembry are just kind of, I mean, I think that Calvin probably got the better of the deal in terms of secondary players, but I mean, that kind of weighs itself with Russell. But one of the things that I was looking at last night whenever I was kind of looking at who my surprises were was I thought that Trae Young was going to take at least a couple of years to develop. And man, he has taken off lately. I mean, you can kind of see like these last 3 games or so. I saw a stat the other day where he was like the last person since like Damon Stoudemire to have at least 23 points and like 8 assists in 4 straight games. And that's kind of like a baseball stat where they just kind of randomly put some arbitrary endpoints there. But I mean, that's just impressive. I mean, and his field goal percentage is shot up to where I think it's like right around like 41, 42, which it's bad, but it's not like tragically bad like it was at the beginning of the year. So it's kind of, I mean, that's a solid win for Calvin when you can kind of say, oh, you got a really good trade on Russell and then flipped him before he took off, but you're still okay. So
yeah, I think that's a great, like, when Kurt asked me about that Kristaps deal too, I thought kind of the same as you, where I've never liked Russell really. I thought he has some deficiencies and never thought his ceiling was super high. He's kind of a scorer, you know, and I haven't usually valued just scorers that much in the past. And so I really liked that deal for Kurt, and I think I still do. I think he probably still does, even though he does like D'Lo. Porzingis, assuming he returns, you know, to full health. And it's really easy to picture him being successful on the Mavericks now just because of the Euro, you know, factor in Dallas somehow, you know, after Nowitzki and Doncic have been awesome there. But when Calvin flipped Russell, I thought Calvin crushed that deal. So then when Russell has played really well of late, also, I think I haven't checked super recently, but it seemed like
he's crushing it. Yeah, he's been really good. He's up to 25. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that was a good example for me where like that deal almost, in my perception, like I was actually negotiating for Trae Young at the same time. I was kind of bummed that Rob went with this deal with Calvin. But I thought that Calvin was winning the deal significantly, but that just kind of goes to show like why, you know, I'm just going to touch briefly on the veto stuff. I don't want to dive into it really here, but just trying not to project like my value of a player on someone else. Because as far as Rob's side of that deal is concerned, I would have had no interest in like giving up that kind of a package to get Russell. But I know in texting, like Rob was really excited. He's like, hey, I don't think we're going to do our little Trae Young for Jarrett Allen deal. Like, I'm going to get Russell. I think it's too good to pass up. And I was like, really, Russell? You know? And so, but he's been great. I'm sure Rob's been really happy with them. And so it would have been a disservice if I had shot that down. Like, oh, he's giving up way too much for Russell. And, oh, if I veto this deal, then maybe I can get Trae Young. And, you know, there's all those kind of wrinkles. So I think it's kind of a good case in point, like why the open market is kind of the goal, you know, the less restriction, the better, you know, to some extent.
Yeah. So you touched on the expectations of conduct for fair play. I admitted to you before we even started this that I hadn't had a chance to look through it. So just encourage everybody to kind of look through those things. Seth did put a lot into making this document, and I think it's a really good document. It's a lot of the things that we've talked about just privately over the years, and just putting everything into one solid document, I think is awesome, because everyone knows the expectations now. One thing that we talked about is let bygones be bygones on some of these vetoes. We have used some of these reasons in the past for vetoes, but now that it's strictly like put into writing for invalid motives for vetoes, it's just make sure that if you're going to veto, use the valid ones, and then of course talking with Seth as the commish, and apparently maybe we could move to something in the future where we kind of do a board rather than just putting that all on Seth's shoulders. Thanks, Seth.
Yeah.
in doing that. So more to come on that, I'm sure. But just
yeah, I think as we think about going to that format maybe and how we decide, there's always kind of like, do we have the whole league vote on every single decision? And and there's kind of been this dichotomy between like a lot of stuff in our leagues historically has been either like the whole league votes or like the commissioner decides unilaterally.
Yeah.
And so potentially some kind of board of maybe 3 people, maybe sort of elected officials, if you will, although that's a little more official than I want it to sound. But maybe we could have a happy medium where everyone in the league kind of has a chance to be well represented, and we have kind of a check and balance, but it's a little more efficient than giving all 12 people, the power to veto. Or because I mean, there's guys that have vetoed my deals that I've never even made a trade with over 10 years. So like, that's kind of an imbalance, I think, where maybe it'd just be a little better to have it consolidated, where everyone can vote to be represented by who they want to be represented by, but then it can be taken care of by whoever those guys end up being. So more on that. We haven't fleshed out kind of the model yet, but it's an idea that we're kicking around to help alleviate some of the deficiencies in the way that we've done it in the past.
Yeah. One of the trades that's not on here that we did kind of talk about before we started was the Harden for
Kawhi
Wall and the fifth, which ended up being Jared Allen. So I know that you kind of teased us in the chat earlier this week, but Harden's historic run has definitely validated you and Sam in that trade. So, but I'll still maintain that Kawhi and turning Wall into John Collins. And Dunn's not been a slouch either for you as well. It's still pretty good. So
yeah, you're right. That's an interesting trade I think we should talk about, because I know we're going to kind of look at different teams that are competing or kind of check in on the rebuilds. This I don't want to send us on a tangent, but as far as Dustin's kind of rebuild effort, I think that trade was kind of a signal of him wanting to try to turn the corner like next year.
Yeah.
Because those are some good young pieces, and
yep.
And Collins is like mid breakout right now, although I wonder if his lack of defensive stats is what led Dustin to kind of like be willing to part with him. Because that's been frustrating for me ever since I got him. I'm like, dude, can you get like a single block? He averaged a block per game like as a rookie in 15 minutes or 20 minutes a game, and now he's playing all these minutes and like being dominant on offense. It's like he's just not blocking shots. So that's already been frustrating for me after like 2 weeks, even though he's been so great. So
I saw
obviously
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, obviously with injured players there's always a spectrum of like how risk averse does the manager want to be. Some people probably would have no interest in Wall at all. On the other hand, you could say, well, this guy's injured, so I'm getting him at a discount. I believe he'll rebound. And there's plenty of there's plenty of historical cases of like good and bad. You can look at like a Paul George who had a horrific injury, but like
Mm-hmm.
Byers is not having, complaining about having him on his roster right now. Like,
not at all.
Been ever since he came back. And Byers is another good example. He's trying to be patient with this Gordon Hayward recovery, which Hayward doesn't look like the same player that he was. And so it's just kind of up to each manager as far as these injured player deals. I know the Oladipo one, going to Byers. I know Rob, didn't value Oladipo that much in that deal because there's skepticism about, is he going to return to that elite level? But there's some lenience, I think, for each manager to decide how risk averse they are or aren't.
Yeah, and that makes it. I mean, that's a good point. I think that you would definitely look for a higher return if Wall wasn't injured in this case. But since you're like, hey, I knew you liked Collins, but I think you'd probably be looking for more if like Wall was, and at the time that you guys made that, he was injured, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was pretty shortly after.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of quizzical to me, but I think that you hit the nail on the head. He saw that while Collins was a good player, he wasn't an elite player, and he got an elite player and a 7th round pick to take a shot at the draft next year as well. And you're right. I mean, I had Kevin Love for a couple of years, and like his lack of defensive stats just drove me batty with that. So it's kind of when you're building a team, it's like if they're a good to have, it's good if they're like your 6th person or like your 6th keeper or something like that. Or if you have Anthony Davis and Jared Allen that are just getting tons of blocks for you anyway, and you can deal with that. So it's a harder roster construction question whenever you got a player like that. Let's see here. We talked about that one. Oh, and then like the big one, or the two real big ones that you had. Turn in Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and Klay Thompson, who kind of ran it back a little bit, but the veto kind of reworking that. I think we've all kind of understand how that all works, and we're all kind of better and more savvy of the path going forward. But turn in Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and Klay Thompson into Giannis. I mean, did you even think about Thomas Bryant and Kelly Oubre in the rest of this deal, or were you just trying to make? I know that you like Kelly Oubre. I do.
Yeah. So Will sent me. I'm trying to remember how this went down exactly, but I think he sent me the original offer, and he included Oubre, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, I like Oubre. I like the Suns, and he's getting a lot of playing time there, and he does a lot of nice things. And so I thought, if nothing else, maybe he's a player who's young enough that can flip to a team like Dustin's for like a late pick or something. I thought there was value in that. Obviously, that wasn't a make or break, on the deal. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I also, when he sent me what was kind of like the next to last iteration of the deal that we ended up accepting, he was going to drop Thomas Bryant, and I was anxious to accept. Yeah, because we were both pretty fickle in this deal. I mean, it went on for weeks where the framework was there, and we would kind of check in every other day and say, how are you feeling? Is this one of those days where you want to, go cavalier and like just pull the trigger? Or, we were both checking each other's roster to keep up with all the players involved in that deal. So the framework stayed consistent for like a week or two before we finally pulled the trigger. But yeah, so I hit him back and was like, hey, would you mind throwing Bryant in the deal instead of just dropping him? Because I liked his percentages, and he was playing pretty well in Howard's absence. And Howard is one of those guys who feels like he'll always stay hurt, Yeah. I literally just dropped Bryant today, ironically, just because I have such imbalance after that deal where I need guards so badly. And
you could say that Dwight Howard gets butt hurt all the time. No,
that's good.
That was for you, Rob. If you're paying attention at this point,
Rob was all about that. I was teasing him the other day. He was giving me updates on Howard's butt because I was trying to trade him Bryant. I thought, hey, like a handcuff, and he's got Okafor, of course, who's doing well in Davis's absence. So I thought maybe there was, a chance for a good fit there. And he was giving me the update on Howard's butt, and I said it with how much you know about Howard's butt. I don't even want to know how much you know about LeBron's groin.
One man should not know this much about another man's butt. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't. This is such a league-altering trade. I don't want to belabor it, but I also don't want to just blow past it. But I obviously I had Giannis back right before he really broke out. I got him the year that he was everybody was hey, this is an exciting young player, and I left him off my top six that year like an idiot. Because I had a really high draft pick and was like, oh, okay, I could probably get him back if I need to. And Will scooped him up right after that. And I've been chasing him for a long time too, as probably everybody else in the league has, because he blew up the next year and he's been a very high pick ever since. So, yeah, it's a huge deal. It reminds me a lot of whenever I traded Sam for Karl Anthony Towns. You just have to throw everything in the kitchen sink to get that franchise cornerstone and make them an offer they can't refuse.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought that was good. I tried to throw as much as I could at Will this offseason, and he was like, nope. Like you said, in the offseason, he was like, nope, I got too many players. That just doesn't make any sense. And then even after we started the year, I kind of tried to throw some other stuff at him, and he was just like, you just don't have the kind of players. Like I still have my guys are probably just a little too young and not established. That I think he was definitely, for good reason, a little gun shy about that. Whereas Kawhi, Jimmy Butler, and Klay Thompson, I mean, it's hard to argue. Those are two top 30 players always, and you know exactly what you're getting to get a push with all the rest of his guys. So
it was a case where any discussion about Giannis was always one of those, well, it'd have to be Anthony Davis kind of talks. And
yeah,
I valued Davis more than Giannis, and he always valued Giannis more. So that was never going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
And this was kind of a unique case where I thought, if I can actually pair Giannis with Davis, and I kind of poo-pooed Giannis for a while because he doesn't hit threes. His free throw percentage is a liability. And I got him, I'm finding that to be true. So I'm kind of you kind of hope he's so young. Maybe, he's 24, I think. Maybe he'll still take some steps there, But I literally today I have him benched because I'm protecting my free throw percentage in my matchup against Ben. And I think I'm okay in the other categories. So it's just kind of interesting because I never benched Kawhi or Butler or Klay, to win a matchup. But with Giannis, I already am. So, but it's a good chance for me to try to rebuild on the fly. And, a lot of going back to even the Harden deal. And I think I traded Durant away, obviously, a couple of years ago. And I get to a point a lot where I have these superstars that are 28, 29. And I've found that their trade value they're not their performance, but their trade value starts to decline really sharply once they're anywhere near that 30 number,
Yeah.
And so it was either I'm going to ride all these guys through the end of their careers, or if I'm going to trade them, I might as well do it now.
Yeah. And that's the lens that I viewed it from. I was like, ooh, it's going to be interesting to see Seth's really challenging people to exercise the veto after another veto so early in this. But I think everybody kind of recognized all three of these guys, Leonard, Butler, and Thompson, are 28, 29, maybe even one of them's 30. I think maybe Clay's 30.
They're all
28, 29.
Actually, Clay's about to turn 29 on Friday, because I found out through trading with Calvin that Clay is my exact age.
Oh, okay. That's funny.
You're born on the same day. So
that's funny.
We're both turning 29 on
Friday. Which, that.
So don't you call him old, because then you're calling me old.
Welcome to my life. Whenever you're like, oh,
sure.
All these guys are born way before I was. Whereas most of the time you're like, oh yeah, they're right around my age. Yeah. So I think that everybody kind of saw Giannis. He's a top 5 player, and he's still got 5 years of being that. So it'd be interesting to see if anybody really kind of had any inclination towards that. And then the big move that I thought that was good for both sides, and I knew you were gonna not take the Oladipo news well and try to figure something out, but that was a quick one. I think it was like 2 days after he was gone for the year, and flipped around for Paul and DeRozan, which was surprising to me. I thought Byers was gonna keep DeRozan forever being a Spur. But he saw the opportunity to get a top tier player, a younger player. And like you mentioned about Paul George earlier, I think that kind of helped him make that that decision, because he's like, hey, if somebody like Paul George can come back from a nasty leg break like he did, like, I'll roll the dice with Oladipo. So
yeah, I from having Chris Paul, he's a guy that occasionally I've gotten towards the end of a year, in a playoff push, but his trade value in my experience has been very low because of his age. He's 33, I think, about to turn 34. And so he's a great player. So like on the surface, you're like, man, that's two really good players for one hurt guy, but I don't pencil Paul in even automatically as a keeper, just he's declined a little bit this year already. And the injury side is interesting too, because he just got back from a 17-game absence. DeRozan missed like a week, kind of spanning when I got him. He just came back yesterday. So not like a total clean bill of health on any of these guys moving forward. And you look for Paul's sitting out today. It's the second game of a back-to-back, and DeRozan on the Spurs. I'm braced for a lot of rest days. So I don't think it was a coup or anything that I pulled off. And it just fit kind of a short-term, plan for me. I don't like DeRozan big picture. He doesn't get threes and his defense is average at best. But the way my roster's constructed after the Giannis deal, I gave up a ton of threes, and that's kind of like Giannis doesn't help there. So I've kind of made my bed, and now I'm sleeping in it. So DeRozan fits kind of the build that I'm stuck with for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
And the other side of that is like good percentages, especially field goal percentage, which he's pretty strong at for a guard. And Oladipo this year, unfortunately, his shooting.
That was his big thing.
So I was bracing myself. I was in that head versus heart kind of decision mode, even while he was healthy, of like, this is a marketable piece. Maybe I can move him for someone who shoots a better percentage for the stretch run here. But so when he got hurt, it was just easier to say, okay, now he has no value the rest of the year. So might as well pull the trigger.
Yeah, I thought it was a good move for both of you. You kind of get back in where you don't kind of languish into like 4th or 5th place or something like that, and just kind of try to surprise people in the playoffs. You were proactive in like, okay, I still have my window open. I need to work on it.
Segue chance, perhaps, if you want to, looking at kind of where teams are at, like Byers. I thought this move signaled for him a kind of a rebuild. So he has ridden like Lowry and Paul and DeRozan for a while. He's got Kevin Love, I think, who's hurt, and kind of a very established team that's made the playoffs a lot over the recent years. But this year was on the outside looking in, and a lot of that was due to injury. And I think he recognized that his core is getting older, and it wasn't getting him to the playoffs this year. So I think he signaled a new direction a little bit with that deal, and in the big picture probably got some good value for that DeRozan and Paul deal, to where he can rebuild with a much younger, keeper in Oladipo.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also, I guess we can kind of go in a couple of different ways. He was Oladipo, and then kind of talking about Byers' team. I know that other people have been kind of snake bitten by injuries and stuff like that, but I feel like his has been kind of a little bit more so than a lot of people. Kind of looking at some of the disappointments of the year. I kind of wrote down a couple of different dudes that I had looked at, like before he traded Paul away, he was one of those dudes. He was injured almost the whole year. Kevin Love's been injured the whole year. Hayward's has been taking a long time to kind of get back from his injury. He'll have like spotty games here and there. You mentioned LeBron being out for Rob. when he's just kind of a testament of health, it's always a little bit harder. But yeah, because like season totals, like he's not even like anywhere. I think he was like 45th or something like that. LeBron was. Yeah, he's not even like on the first page. But Westbrook for Sam, he's just been that's one of those weird ones where it's like the thing that I saw was most of these disappointments are just health related. I mean, for the most part, the NBA is pretty when the guys are healthy, it's pretty standard. The good players are good. You don't see a whole lot of dips in production unless they're not healthy. Like Paul Wall being healthy, it's like basically the only two that I could really see that were having a problem. And I guess Oladipo, it's hard to determine whether he was just not shooting the ball well because he wasn't healthy. But he was kind of the same thing as Westbrook. He was kind of losing some of his field goal percentage. And Otto Porter, for some reason, he was a top guy that I know that you've always liked him as well. That very field goal percentage and free throw percentage dependent. Everything else stays the same, but he's just been a drain on both of those, and his values kind of dropped out of the top 50, so to speak. So Oh, and Draymond. I'm sure Rob would be like, hey, what the heck? What about Draymond? He's like shooting like a guard. He's shooting 41% or something like that. He just can't hit any threes anymore. So that was the big thing. And like all the rest of his game kind of drops from there. But the Warriors aren't missing him very much since they have Cousins and the unbeatable team. So I don't want to necessarily kill the rest of these, but yeah, I mean, kind of the disappointments. I'm sure Byers would kind of feel like he was at the beginning of the year, like that he would be in the playoff conversation, and he's kind of out of it now. And I thought Kurt's team would be a little bit more competitive this year as well. But when he made that trade for Kristaps, like it just kind of signaled like that was a good deal for him, and it kind of turns that off. So
yeah. I think this will be for Byers' first year to not make the playoffs. I think
that's right. It was you and him that had made it every year, right?
I think it's Rob and Byers.
Oh, okay.
I missed one fairly early on.
Oh, okay.
So I think Rob will have that streak to himself now.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah.
What about you? Any people that you could think of that you were kind of like, wow, I can't believe that guy has been so bad this year, or just a little bit of a disappointment, I guess.
It's not a big guy. It's more on like the Porter scale maybe, but another guy that Will owned last year that I was after as like a high upside guy was Rondé Hollis Jefferson. He's been pretty much just waiver wire, all year long. So he was never like a high profile guy, but I don't remember specific details, but I feel like I probably made some offers for a Porter and RHJ package that I'd probably be embarrassed by now, and Will probably would like want to take those deals retroactively, but I can't remember specifics. I just know I was after those guys quite a bit and was kind of judging like, could I actually keep both of them? Like last year, would they actually both make my keeper list? And I kind of decided that they might not. So I didn't give up as much as I thought I might in a vacuum, but yeah, he just has been kind of a scrub this year. So
yeah. What about surprises for you?
I think Kemba's a big surprise for me. He's always been a good player, but like he feels elite now, and I always had issues with his game. I know his field goal percentage is still not stellar or anything, and he was never like a super strong defender, but I feel like ever since, I'm trying to remember if I traded him to Rob or I traded him to Sam. I think I traded him
to Sam. You traded him to Sam. Sam traded him to Rob. Yep.
Rob. I feel like ever since Rob got him, I've looked over like longingly at Kemba. Like, oh man, like I had him and he's like better than I thought. Another guy who that kind of applies to, I would say is Drew Holiday, who I've always really liked.
Yep.
But now he's like undebatable, like superstar player, and Paul is fairly, treating him that way in trade talks and things like that, where
Yeah.
Holiday's virtually untouchable, and he just does a lot of things. Those defensive stats for a point guard where he's getting like almost a block per game is something that I always value really highly. That's why I liked John Wall as my franchise point guard for so long. So
Yeah.
Those will be the
Because you
two.
had Holiday before, right?
I did. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was his thing, is he always struggled with injuries. Like to start his career, he was just that guy that couldn't stay healthy. And now that he has, he's was he a Pacer, or am I thinking about Darren Collison too much? And
you think about Collison, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think they ever had Drew.
Yeah.
They have Aaron now, Aaron Holiday.
That's right.
Youngest brother.
I kind of split my surprises up into like vets that either made a significant like jump or like return to glory, so to speak. Like, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying, was like, if health, everything being equal, health is like the biggest factor with these guys. Once they're good, they're good. But like, I was surprised that Connolly and Gasol have returned to their top tier form. I mean, they're in, oh gosh, what was it? I think they're in the top 20s, or at least by total stats. I think they were in, maybe not the averages, but they've made a return to being great players. And of course, they were tossed back into the draft pool. So people picking.
I think I had a negative thing to say when Joel drafted Conley. I think the last time a stream like this or a video like this, I thought it didn't make sense for him to get an older, like always injured player. You know, he's been awesome, and I've tried to trade for him. So I'm eating my words now. You know, so
yeah. But George making his leap to like the top 5, like. I mean, we talked about it earlier with that leg break. I think we all thought like, oh, his days are numbered. Like he'll just kind of sink back into like maybe top 50 player, but he won't be elite of the elite. And he's just shooting the mess out of the ball. I mean, almost 4 threes a game and just 2 steals a game. Jeez, man.
It's how much like Carmelo getting out of the way seems to help.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
And even as bad as Westbrook has been, and as tough as Westbrook is kind of, you know, perceived to be to play with, like George has pretty much taken over where he's the guy in Oklahoma City now. And I don't think we foresaw that at all.
At all. Yeah. Very strange. And I mean, you don't hear anything about Westbrook like poo-pooing it either, which shows the reason why George stuck around, you know? It's like, oh, Kevin Durant left because I'm a crappy teammate. Maybe I should be a better teammate.
Yeah.
Let's see. Vucevic is one.
Yeah.
Like, I talked with Paul about him, and we started talking deals. And I like him as a player. I just didn't know if I wanted to make a deal based on where my team was at. And so that was kind of, and it's just so uncertain of if he's not on the Magic. Like, I don't think he puts up those numbers, you know?
Yeah.
So he's a really hard player. I know you and I talked about Cantor a few weeks back. I'd be really interested to see like what other people are sending him or talking with him about, because I mean, that's a top 15 player, and just the uncertainty around him, maybe after the trade deadline in real life goes away and it's before the trade deadline in our fantasy league, he could probably keep him and it'll be a lot stronger for him.
Yeah,
but
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I would attest to that personally. That's been my, like, I've always loved Vucevic. Like, I think the year I won a championship, he was on my roster.
Yeah.
That was 2012, I think, but he was kind of breaking out a little bit. And I think Dustin had dropped him because he was hurt and he wasn't expected to get back in time, like for our fantasy playoffs.
Oh,
and then picking him up just in case, and then he came back just in time for me to face Dustin in the playoffs.
Oh no!
Against him and beat him. I think that was the year Dustin had gone like undefeated in the regular season and set like the record.
Yeah, 126
best win percentage, and but then I knocked him off in the playoffs. I think that was my. You know, I don't know if I actually won that year or not. I made the championship. I don't know if that was the year I won or not. But anyway, long history, like positive history I have with Vucevic, and he's been kind of one of those underrated stars, I feel like, for a while. And
Yeah.
but I really like him, and I like Drew a lot too on Paul's team. And so, unfortunately for me, both those guys are just playing out of their minds right now. So there's no like sneaking them out of Paul's roster. Like
Yeah.
he's very in tune with like, you know, he's not going to give them away for any kind of discount or anything. So,
Well, the other couple of ones that I had, Gallinari for you has been just unbelievable. And mainly that's due to health. I mean, he's had that
Yep.
back issue forever. Buyers held on to him forever because when he's healthy, he's great. And then Aldridge has kind of made his renaissance. Tobias Harris for the Clippers made a big leap this year. They're really he had a really good second half last year, and a lot of people were banking on that to happen again this year, and it's held true.
He's on Paul's team too, right?
I think so.
I think he has all, because he has Gary Harris and Joe Harris too.
That's right.
Yeah. Yep. So yeah, his team is. That's how he stayed in the mix. I mean, I know he made the playoffs last year, but I feel like the competition from like you and Sam is more stiff this year.
Yeah.
And so that's probably why, you know, your guys' teams have like took a pretty significant step forward. And that's why Paul's still kind of like stuck in that 7th territory, but he's very much a contender, I think.
Yeah.
And got a lot of like, you know, hasn't done a lot of tangible moves to like trades to improve his team, but like just trusting the core that he has and letting those guys take a step forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause none of those guys were like highly drafted or touted or thought of. So, I mean, sticking with it, it reminds me a lot of like Buyers kind of thought process. Like, if some dude breaks out just because he's not like some top tier prospect, I'm just going to ride it out and see how it goes. So there's plenty of those stories in the NBA and in the reverse as well.
Oh, for sure.
D'Lo, we talked about. I kind of put him in the vets rather than the young guys just because it is his 4th season and he had some health issues and things like that. One that kind of snuck up on me when I was looking at this was Montrezl Harrell. He was a dude that I always liked. He reminded me a lot of, Kenneth Faried, just like an undersized energy guy. And he got to go to the Clippers. He was buried behind Clint Capella in Houston, and he's just been great for the Clippers this year.
Yeah.
What about your young guys that you thought were surprising this year? I've got a couple that I was going to say.
You can lead off. I'll try to think of some. Yeah.
Pascal Siakam in Toronto. Ben was always a big fan of his because he's a NMSU Aggie.
Oh, okay.
But I don't think he ever thought that he would be this good. Nurkic, I guess I kind of could have put him with the vets with D'Lo, but Nurkic, I mean, he jumped like everybody kind of gave him mess after the Nuggets went with Jokic and kind of traded him off, but Nurkic has been great for Kurt. And even though Doncic and Ayton were obviously the top rookies of the class, like they're both 33 and 35 in the rankings. That's just crazy to be that good out of the gate. Kind of Sabonis for Buyers, and then we talked about Trae Young already. But one try not to toot my own horn, but Buddy Hield, I just kind of grabbed him. I grabbed him like in the 9th round. They had him ranked like 85th or something like that in Yahoo, and I was just like, I don't think that he'll be this good. He'll have solid percentages, get me some threes, but he's just played out of his mind this year. So he was kind of a younger guy that I was like, that I was not expecting that from.
Yeah, every time I take a peek at your roster to look at like trade possibilities, especially because I've been like scouring, you know, everyone else's roster to look for guards, that I feel like I have a lot of talent in the front court that I'm just not being able to maximize. Pieces I don't want to drop for, you know, adding a free agent guard, but maybe I can trade a role player for a role player. Every time I look at your team, I'm like, maybe I can. No, like there's no way. Like Field he's good now. Like I
You think
missed
too
it.
highly of him now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like kind of like how I said I can't sneak like Drew or Vucevic off of Paul's roster. Like I'm not gonna be able to sneak, Buddy off of your roster, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So the other one, I'm sure you thought of him too, but kind of that late draft pick, like post type, because Hield is a guy who, he was before Trae Young, he was kind of maybe the next Curry, like just a college player who would just nail like
shoots a lot of threes.
is basically all it is. But so I thought like his rookie year was kind of uninspiring, and so yeah, I definitely think he's been like way better than I thought. And the other one is De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, I can't believe I skipped over him. I wrote him first, and I skipped right past him. But
that's been crazy. And Kurt like texted me during the draft and stuff, and we were very like far spaced apart in our picks because I hardly had any, per usual, like until late, and he had a bunch of early picks, and he was getting down to, it was one of his last picks, which wasn't like super late in the draft because he had so many early picks.
No, I looked back at it. It was like the 11th round, I think. Yeah.
Okay. But it was like one of his one or two like last like flyers, I think.
Yeah.
Like, what about De'Aaron Fox? And I was kind of like, meh, like didn't like the shooting percentage, like not really sure like he's gonna run an NBA team that long, as a starting point guard. He's been awesome. Like when Oladipo got hurt, that's a guy that I thought of. Like, I wonder if Kurt, maybe would flip. Like, I would have done it, Oladipo for Fox, and but he's still like too young, and I don't think Kurt. I didn't even send the offer. I don't think. I think I texted like, you probably wouldn't do Fox for Oladipo, would you?
He's like, nope, no, I wouldn't.
Just another one that I just like too late on,
Yeah. So you and I've talked way too much. You've probably heard me talk way too much about the 2017 draft. That was like my big draft where I drafted a ton of dudes, and I knew that I was going to get screwed over one of them, making the wrong decision. And so my DSJ decision over Fox, I thought it was going to be over Allen, but it's over Fox. Allen's a good player, but Fox has made that leap that I expected DSJ to make this year. And what's funny, I went back over kind of my little handwritten notes for the 2017 draft, and I always had Fox ranked highly. And I was just like, why did I give up so easily on this guy? But like you said, like after his first year, you're just like, maybe it's going to be really slow. I threw him back in thinking, I'll get him. And then I drafted Dragic and Teague and was like, I'm pretty set on point guards. Feel like an idiot now, but those are the shakes. So
that's how it goes. Yeah, that I did that last year in baseball, which is maybe not a relevant tangent to take for this basketball video, but I did that with Ozzy Albies. Like I had him at the end of the year, and I was like,
and then Rob,
like I won't keep him, but like I'll be the one who has like my eye on him, and like I'll draft him back, and then like on draft day, I'm like, whoa, this Domingo Santana guy had a really good year last year. I didn't realize. Like, he's young. Okay, don't mind if I do. And then Rob snatches up all of these, and I ended up cutting Santana. So that's how it goes. It's hard not to be overly swayed by that first year, especially if it's a team that's like contending consistently. To have that patience, and even in your spot, like last year, like you can't keep all of those guys, so you're trying to pick the top ones that you can roll with. So
I don't know what I'm doing with the with this. There we go. Now I can't even see you at all. Oh well.
I only see you instead of your screen. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe you cannot minimize. Okay. Oh, I guess I share. I guess I stopped sharing. Okay. Share. There we go. Oh, there's a button that says stop share, like right where I was trying to like kind of minimize some windows and get some stuff out of there. So just kind of to wrap it up, we've got our playoff picture. Like we talked about, there's kind of the top four, and then like another four where I'll expect to be like fighting for like that 5th and 6th spot with Paul, Joel, and Sam. Between the four of us, and then it seems like it's kind of like it always is, or it has been the last couple of years, between you and Calvin and Rob and Will. At least it seems that way. Except for Sam, kind of the year after that. I mean, here it
I
is.
have this like really deep fear that this is going to be another 2016 for Sam, where he's just going to pop up and just win the thing, and then.
Oh, you think so? Okay.
Yeah, I'm not wanting to face him in the playoffs. I'll just put it that
he's still a really good team. Steph had a little bit of a injury at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and Harden was out for a little stretch too, and so he's been, and Ayton's out now. And early on, Sam wasn't able to be super diligent with the lineup setting either. Just has a baby who's like 8 months old and works as a lawyer and is coaching a high school basketball team. So there's a lot going on. So I think his standings are a little bit deflated just because of that as well. So
you could even argue there's a top 5. So
I've been seeing it as a top 6 all year, but out of respect to like Joel and Paul's teams that have hung around and are like after this week are going to be right with you guys, it might make more sense to group them with you guys instead of putting you and Sam up to that top 4, but there's some good teams.
Yeah, because I just look at it as like my losses are to Will, and then tied Rob, lost to you, and then we're about to and lost to Will again, lost to Paul and Calvin. So I just kind of see it at that. We play one more time. Rob and I play one more time as well. So but all right. Anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Maybe just touch real briefly on those rebuilding teams, probably the bottom 3, although I think Byers has just entered that. He's probably the newest member of that group. But for Dustin, I think that Collins and Dunn deal for Wall, in texting him recently, I think you experienced this too, and Kurt last year was in the same boat where like you go all youth, but then you can't just like keep 3 forever and have a high draft pick. Like eventually you have to build a deeper core than that. And I think this will be the year most likely that he turns that corner. And I think that partially getting hopefully a healthy, established superstar in Wall next year to pair with Lillard, and then to probably Jaren Jackson for sure, I think has done enough as a rookie to probably keep on that keeper list. And then Miles Turner, I know Dustin continues to be really high on. So it's too bad for him that LeVert is hurt, because for me, I would like to see more. Like he killed it at the start of the year, but when I look at his numbers, the way like where they finished, it's kind of like fringe, maybe 6th or 7th keeper. So for a rebuilding team, I'm not sure, but if he had played the whole year, we'd have a much better sense of whether he would crack that list. So, but I think Dustin, his vision, and I think the way his team is shaping up is probably, unless he were to win the lottery, then you probably keep 3. But if he doesn't do well in the lottery, kind of like last year, I think maybe he'll keep 4 or 5 and start to actually compete, again, and maybe you see that jump up to like an 8th or 9th spot next year, or who knows, but start to get some traction there.
Yep. Agreed.
What do you think about, say, Kurt's? Oh, Ben's next down there. Let's go in that order.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like the same thing with Ben's team. He's like one more. This will be like the year that I think that he'll probably keep just a little bit more. It'll be interesting to see like how they dare each other, if they like, depending on lottery standings and stuff like that. Like Wendell Carter Jr., I mean, he's been kind of up and down, but I think he's a good keeper. And Markkanen's good. Beal, Doncic, and then depending on how he closes out the year, I've been pretty impressed, even though the numbers aren't there, but the consistency is not there. But SGA has been really good.
I've been kind of keeping an eye on him too, and in some ways it's not real fun to be in contention late in the year, because like a trade for like SGA wouldn't make sense for me, but I'm really liking what I'm seeing, and it'd be fun like to be in Ben's position and kind of ride him out, see how he finishes the year, and make the call on whether he's worth keeping or not. But I think Doncic gives Ben the most traction in his rebuild that he's had to this point.
He's just one of those dudes that just ticks off almost every box except maybe a little bit of the defensive stats. Like
right. And right now the percentages aren't good, but I would expect, I mean, he's 19 years old, so I would expect those percentages are good. And he just passes the eye test as a great shooter. You know, he's clearly got the touch for it. So I think it's just a matter of maybe shot selection and things like that, where he should get those percentages up a lot. But I think, like, going back to that draft that had Simmons and Ingram, and that was right before we implemented the lottery, and that's kind of like what sparked a lot of the need for expectations, on tanking and things like that. So he ended up with Ingram, who was kind of the 1B, to the 1A of Simmons in that draft. And then unfortunately, Ingram just has not. I mean, even to today, he's kind of like, do you keep him? Do you not? It's consistently underwhelmed, I think. So I'm glad for Ben that this draft, like, Doncic was the guy that, looking back, we all would have taken number one. I think that's true even for Sam, who got Ayton, which you don't complain about getting Ayton, but especially with Sam's roster makeup with all the guards he has. It looks like the guy, and so I think it hasn't worked out in the standings for Ben this year, but I think that the rebuild took a big step forward with that draft pick.
Yep, getting a hit with him, because I mean, who was his pick last year? Oh, he wasn't able to get on, and that's when it auto-drafted Gasol for him. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And then Kurtz, I think he's going to be in the spot again where he's going to have to keep a young core and figure it out. But I think with Porzingis back, Booker, Fox, and then Bagley if he decides to keep him, and then Nurkic, like, that's a solid group. And I think that if he's kind of like what I was last year. I think that he's still kind of like, okay, I'll give myself one more year to try to give myself as many people as I can and move forward, and then, like, start making, like, pickups for, like, being in competition rather than kind of being as forward looking as he is. So I think that next year he's going to be a handful with his team.
For sure. And I think Murray you could put probably on the fringe of his keeper consideration as well.
Yep.
Probably not Steven Adams, although that's just one of those guys who his value is so consistent. He's really useful, but he hardly will crack like a top 6 keeper list.
He's like right on the fringe. And like a guy that continues to drive me nuts all year is Bam. Like, when Bam gets to play, man, like, he's just so stinking awesome. But like being buried behind Whiteside is just so, like, you can never predict it. Even when he's on your team, you can never play him like with any kind of certainty. But if he were to ever get traded somewhere else, like, I think he'll turn out to be a really good player. Who else did we want to? I think we talked to everybody.
We didn't touch too much on Joel's team specifics at all.
That's true.
He's been kind of where
Joel's had a little bit of what Byers has had, like a lot of injuries, people in and out, stuff like that. Richardson spent some time injured. Whiteside spent some time injured. But Covington now is injured. So I mean, we spoke really highly of his draft.
We did.
Whenever he drafted, he did a good job. Brogdon's back up to where he was his rookie year. So I think just kind of with him getting some health, like, he'll be he's been really consistent. Drummond's been having a really good year. So he's just kind of one of those teams that will never will always be in contention at various levels. So it's kind of a fun, somewhat arbitrary, but kind of a fun thing to track after, I think it's been 3 years finishing 7th, which is like, has got to be agony. It's like probably easier. It's like, would you rather get blown out or like lose at the buzzer, and equivalent of that in our playoff races, especially last year. He and Paul were so tight. In fact, I think Joel took a lead like into the last week, but then
I think he was like a half game. Well, it'd have to be a whole game, I guess, but I think he
Yeah.
finished within like one game. But so it's been interesting to see like he's kind of in that area again. I agree. We really liked his draft.
You're right. It was a loss. He took a draw. Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So, but yeah, his draft, I thought maybe, and he did actually, Joel was in the playout, like in the top 6 for a decent stretch this year.
Yeah.
And it's only been recently, I think, that he's dropped a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the Covington injury is the big one because, for years, Joel's team has been so post heavy.
Yeah.
And then this draft, he got some balance by going super like point guard heavy in the draft.
Yeah.
So he kind of has these bookends now, but the middle of his roster is still a little shallow. Like that's the next piece that he'll probably have to address. And Covington in the draft was a great piece to stick in the middle of his lineup like that. And I think since he's been hurt, he's just missing that a lot. Like right now, he just kind of has a little bit of a void at the small forward position, and that's probably capping him a little bit. But
yeah, it's hard to replace those.
Strong
it's
group
hard to
of
replace
guards.
3 threes a game. Yeah.
Yeah, and Richardson, that's coincided with Richardson taking kind of a step back because his first month or so this year, he looked like he was taking a major step forward.
Yeah, they had a ton of injuries.
And I checked in on him a couple times since because I really need a guard, and he hasn't really gotten it going for me when I look at where the season like averages have sunk to now. And that's another guy with small forward eligibility that he's kind of counting on to make up for the Covington loss. And you're right. It's just hard to replace. Rocco is such a unique player. It's hard to replace him. So,
yeah. All right. Any predictions at your peril?
Man, I think Will probably crushes me next week.
Yeah.
And then at the very least earns the tiebreaker with me in the playoffs.
The all important.
It's actually it's based on head to head, and I feel like every year we revisit this, and I never remember what we say. But it is head to head, is what it's set up for now.
Okay.
He beat me 6-2 earlier this year, so even if I pull off a win against him this next week, I think it's unlikely that I'll beat him 6-2, or 7-1 or whatever would be required.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think Will maybe can pull it off. Maybe that's a little biased because I really respect the package of players that I sent to him in that Giannis deal.
Yeah.
And I'm still scrambling. I underestimated how hard it would be to just kind of like reshuffle my roster balance positionally because I feel like I still have a lot of talent, but I guess good guards are seeming to be more scarce than good forwards. And I didn't really, or centers. And I didn't really have a perspective on that before I started trying to trade like, okay, what's the equivalent of like a Thaddeus Young or a Rudy Gay, that I can trade for just like a guard version of that amount of value, and I have not been able to do that,
Yeah. I would say that Will's pretty much the front runner. All the bounce back guys that I kind of talked about, and then Pascal on top of that. If you look at this, like I just sorted by 2018-19, and like every single one of his dudes is a top 100 player, except for Otto Porter.
Yeah.
So
Otto Porter's your worst player. Your team's
right. You're doing really well. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's still got some more. I don't want to like tip him off to this necessarily, but I think he's got more assets to use, like trade, draft picks and stuff that he can trade over. The deadline's not till the end of the month, the 28th, I think it falls on this year.
Yeah.
And I've used almost all my bullets. I've got a couple tradable assets left that I'm trying to figure out how to spend the most wisely. But I think Will can improve this team even further.
Yeah, it's just always hard. Yeah, it's always hard whenever you have like really like highly ranked players. I guess whenever you put average stats, Morris and Collison are kind of they benefit from just being consistent playing game in and game out. But it's always hard to kind of trade out some of those guys where you're like, I got all top 100 players. I'm set.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, all right. Well, it's not to say that anything can't happen. Will's I think in pole position, but as we've seen before. Calvin's won before. Rob
I
won
never
plenty
rule
of times.
Calvin out for sure.
Yeah.
Calvin's got that like unsexy team thing that works for him, and I think even our Thompson for Warren deal was kind of indicative of that. Although Warren's hurt now, so that like unpredictably, like that backfired in a way that we couldn't have expected. But if you look at his lineup like from last year, and you compare, if you looked at everyone's roster from last year, I think just looking at like household names and things, I don't think you would pick Calvin to maybe even make the playoffs, honestly, let alone win the whole thing. And but he strikes me as a guy who has a good has his finger on the pulse of like, I guess the fantasy equivalent of like team chemistry, which I guess is more roster balance, and he just can beat you in a lot of different ways, and he'll do it quietly and then move along. So
won't blow you out in one category. Everything's, like you said, balanced in every way. It's like, I'm gonna get 5 categories, lose 3, and they're gonna be all right there within each other.
Yeah, and when you get to playoff time, that's all it takes. If you can grab 5, or if you have a tiebreaker and you can grab 4, so his team he's one of those teams that's better suited, I think, for the playoffs than the regular season. And mine consistently has proven to be the opposite, and I never learned. So, but if you're Sam Gibson, you're really dangerous too. And your team's probably still a year away. Even I think there's probably a top 2 or 3 team next year, but certainly dangerous in a 1 week sample size.
Yeah, that's been the tough thing for me. Just kind of like, I've had some players pop, and then some where I'm just kind of like week to week, I'm just like, am I in contention or not? And so then I'll grab dudes that I feel like Harry Giles, and like I've picked up like Miles Bridges like 17 times, because like I'm just I feel like I don't want to be the guy that like the De'Aaron Fox, where I just let them go back into the player pool, and then they break out. So it's been a little tough for me to kind of figure out if I'm really in contention or not. So yeah, it's been tough, but cool, man. Well, I'm sure we're over like an hour, maybe even an hour and a half here. So I'm just going to stop this so that they can go, you guys are nuts.
Yeah.
All right, and until maybe we'll do something again around playoff time, or maybe kind of towards the end of.
That'd be cool. I'm glad you had the idea to do this. That was. I always would do like the write-ups and stuff, which is fun in its own right. But I think different kinds of like media content keeps it interesting, and certainly having 2 perspectives, in a conversational format is more fun than just reading one guy's paragraphs. So. It's always fun too, whether they enjoy it or not. I know.
Right. Maybe, and there'll be video evidence of they're so wrong about everything.
Yeah, for sure. Mike Conley, I'm owning that right now.
Right.
Did not think that Joel should have drafted Conley. I was like, he has no vision for his team. And then I'm like, hey, would you want to trade me Mike Conley? He's like, no. I'm like, okay. I'm embarrassed to ask you this, but I offered him Gallinari for Conley, and I thought that was a perfect deal because I really needed a guard, and they're both playing great. And this is before Gallinari got hurt, of course, which he's back soon, maybe this week. But I was like, they're both like, the injury history on both those guys is pretty significant. And I was like, you've got a ton of point guards, but you don't need you need small forwards, But his response was basically, from a statistical standpoint, like, he only really helps me in rebounds, and I'm fine in rebounds because his front court is so strong, And I was like, can't really argue that. So we'll see if I can ever make a trade with Joel before I die. But.